I know, I know. But Exo, this update isn't out yet. Why are you talking about your thoughts on an update that isn't out yet? We should just wait for the update to come out before we talk about it. You know, to which I say no. I just don't want to. For those of you who are unaware, Clay started streaming a while ago, and he showed off a ton of neat things that have to do with the next update, and I do want to talk about it because I think it's interesting. Starting off with the otters, I love them. They're like catcoons, but you know, on the water. And honestly, I would say with a better name because Marauder is so good. Next, they added a new boat that you like have to find. It's strictly an upgrade to the standard boat, and it has a chest in the center of it that's like built into the boat itself. You find them in sunken chests, which are getting even more updates down the line. Starting off with possibly the biggest one, sunken chests now spawn on pirate raids. So whenever you're getting raided by the pirate monkeys, they'll have a chest with them, and it'll be, well, you know, it'll be a sunken chest, but they'll still curse you if you choose to kill the monkeys and take their treasure, though the rewards might make it worth it. Once again, you know, I just want to preface this with, this is all just information given to us by Clay in this live stream. So, you know, the updates themselves aren't really out yet, but we can kind of make do with the information that they've provided and just kind of take a look at everything that has, you know, been happening behind the scenes. One of the biggest things is that monkeys now have begun marking their territory. So that means the proximity to the island is now indicated by some weird spray painted on rock. So that's super neat and kind of fixes a major complaint that players, myself included, have had, where it's just impossible to find the monkey island without just exploring the entirety of the ocean, since there aren't really any indicators prior to this update. Going back to the sunken chest for a bit, it also introduces a new type of seed, which produces new types of trees. The two shown on stream include the Sprout Rock, which produces fruit that yields in gems. We currently don't know what type of gem it produces, we just know that it yields in gems. So that could just mean that it produces something like red or blue gems, you know, the basic ones. Or it could even mean that we could find a way to produce something like green gems, which would be insanely useful. The second is the Gloomthorn, which produces fruit that gives you night vision for an amount of time. It's pretty straightforward. It seems like a enhanced glowberry almost, but I definitely do like the aesthetics of them. Currently, all the information that we have is that these trees have a chance of spawning from any of these seeds. So that means if you plant one seed, there's no guarantee that it's going to yield in the plant that you want. You're just going to have to like try to brute force it, I guess. Once again, this is all found in the sunken chests, which means that sunken chests have all of a sudden become a lot more desirable, since the trees themselves seem huge as far as what they do. Since, you know, a way to just grow gems is like huge in and of itself, and night vision is never a bad thing. In the live stream though, Clay did say these two in regards to showing off the seeds, and each seed has a chance at spawning any of the trees, it seems. So we might be looking forward to even more than just the ones that they showed off. It's very possible that these introductions will make sunken chests things that players will actually want to go for, since they're currently just very whatever. You know, they're sort of out of the way, and typically players don't really rush them for anything, though their loot isn't like terrible, so maybe just introducing new mechanics and new benefits to it is enough to kind of incite people to go try to find them. Lastly, in regards to the ocean content, I won't go too into detail about this one because it seems like it's an interesting fight that kind of has a lot of details that, you know, you could go and watch, or you could wait until the update comes out to try to fight yourself. Finally, Crab King has gotten a rework. Let's go! Crab King's fight seems to have gotten a lot more involved in regards to what you have to do in order to manage it, but it's also become a lot more fun. The biggest note is that things throw rocks to damage your boat, but don't cause holes in them. And the claws no longer try to sink your boat, which is so good, since that's the major complaint that anybody has ever had about that fight. But here's the thing I've been looking forward to talking about, and the things that I want to talk about the most, and that's the skill tree updates. Specifically, because these two skill trees focus on Wort and Winona. Starting off with Wort, you know, obviously I have the video talking about Wort. I think Wort is a very strong character, which is a little bit unfortunate that from what they've shown, this update kind of womps, I'm not gonna lie. You know, this is just from what they've shown, and, you know, just surface level understanding of how everything works, but, you know, Clay said that they wanted to put more emphasis on the swampy aspects of Wort, so they decided to give Wort a bee-bomb equivalent, but with mosquitoes, as well as, like, mosquito repellent. And it's not bad, but, like, why, though? Like, mosquitoes aren't really something that people focus on for the most part, and it's for good reason, since they're just kind of nuisances in the swamp. And you typically just leave a merm there to farm mosquito sacks if you really wanted 8 HP worth of healing in regards to playing Wurt. But mosquitoes are pretty negligible for the most part, and having them as damage over time type of deal isn't something that's too noteworthy in my opinion. And lastly, in that kind of swampy aspect, Wurt can craft a booster shot that heals merms and herself, which is kind of just, you know, like, if she had an AoE method to, like, deliver that healing effect, then, you know, that would be good, you know, I could see that being useful. But really just being able to heal a singular merm off of this feels kind of lackluster, and doesn't really feel realistic for what you're gonna do, since usually you have at least 3 or 4 merms hired for any one given task. Lastly is the communal kelp dish, which respawns merms faster. This is also kind of mid, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know what the details of it is, you know, we don't know the numbers, we don't know the exact way that it works, if it has any boosts. But having faster spawning merms isn't something that's bad. It just feels like I almost want to say that it's a waste of a skill slot, you know, if that's all it does. Since I can always just have more merms instead of just relying on the same few houses that I'm stuck with. You know, they did briefly mention that we're going to have more perks that influence how smart merms are, which, you know, I don't know what that means, but for our sakes, it just means that they're going to have merm buffs, which seems pretty interesting in and of itself. You know, I'm never going to say no to buffing merms, since that's, like, a really strong aspect of the character, but we'll see. And next up, this is the one that I've been questioning about the most, and this is the one that I've been thinking about the most, and that is the Winona skill tree update. So Winona, for those of you who might be unfamiliar, is my main. I'm basically one of 2 Winona mains who really play this game, so this update for the character is something that I'm very invested in, and have been pretty anxious about. Proceeding forward, during the stream, Clay kind of hinted at some of these perks being base kit, and some of them being tied to the skill tree. In fact, they kind of offhandedly mentioned that some of it was going to be base, but I'm uncertain if they meant that just the one specific things are going to be base kit, or just how much of it is going to be tied to the skill tree itself. So, you know, there's that I'm a little bit confused on, but, you know, I'm just assuming that all of this is tied into the skill tree before I assume that it's base kit. And first and foremost, Winona's getting a remote. This remote was shown interacting with primarily one thing, and that's catapults, which, when she uses it, cause catapults to target where you want them to fire on, which seems pretty good. This just means that you'll be able to focus fire on one particular area, and probably most importantly, lets your catapults fire even if things aren't hostile towards you. They also seem to have buffed the fire rate on catapults when you're using the remote, so you could queue up shots in order to increase the damage output, but that does consume charge on the remote itself, which means that it might not be worth it to do so, but we'll see. Winona is the only one who's able to use this, which is an interesting decision. You know, I'll talk about that later, so hang on to that idea until then. Next up is the changes to all of Winona's structures, and those are that the structures now have a snooze mode in which they don't drain charge from whatever they're connected to, as well as the fact that you could pack them up and move them. But speaking of things that they're connected to, Winona's generator and generator now have different things in them, which do seem to be tied into the skill tree branches, as Clay has kind of said on stream, with the shadow side primarily focusing on the niter generator, which can be fueled with nightmare fuel now, as well as the classic niter, while the generator falls more on the lunar side, and it can be fueled with pure brilliance, and it can be infinitely fueled with the celestial shard. So that being the thing that you get when you deconstruct the celestial crown. Each of these have their own appeals and draws to them, with the big things that come to mind being the nightmare fuel and the celestial shard. Nightmare fuel being able to fuel a generator is pretty useful, simply due to the fact that nightmare fuel tends to be abundant throughout a playthrough. It's really easy to farm early on, it's easy to mass farm them later, and it's beneficial to have throughout, so you're not really gonna be hurting for nightmare fuel as far as generator fuel goes. The shard is kind of the opposite end, where it's a lot harder to get, but, you know, it's infinite.
Like, I don't think I need to explain the prospects of having an infinite fuel source to you, but, you know, it just saves on resources. It would be great if you could use the lunar husks for fuel, but, like, it's essentially just a leaf, so it doesn't make sense to plug it into a generator, so, you know, that's whatever. But the issue with this is that pure brilliance is already something that you're kind of lacking on in comparison to something like the husks. So I don't think you're probably going to use it in order to power generators unless they attach some sort of, you know, benefit to it. Which, speaking of, Clay has said that generators have new combinations in which you plug in gems and those gems have different effects depending on what order you put them in. So that's going to be something that's interesting to tinker with, and, you know, it'll just be cool to explore. It's tough to say which is better throughout the game though, but these seem to be only one aspect of the affinity perks, so we'll have to wait and see what the deal is with the other aspects of it once the update comes out. Following this, Winona's getting her own Roomba, which is like the Wobot found in scrapyards. Not really much else to say about it, you know, it's just a mini Roomba. Next up is something that was only really teased for the most part. It was shown briefly, but it's something that has immediately garnered quite a bit of buzz, and that's the telepath, which, similar to Wagstaff's from Hamlet, is basically just an alternative to a telelocator focus and a telelocator staff, but, like, pretty good. You know, in Hamlet / base game Don't Starve, which, you know, funnily enough, I don't actually own, so I'm getting all my information secondhand. A Wagstaff is able to craft a telebrella, which functions similarly to a telelocator staff, with the focus being the nearest telepath, wherever that might be. This allows for long-ish range teleportation, about half the map, and Clay said that this is currently Winona only, which, you know, now that I've kind of gone over the update itself, let's go to talking about what my thoughts on it are. Because people keep asking me what I think about the proposed changes, people keep asking me about the updates, so I figure I might as well put it into a video. And my verdict is, for the most part, I like them. You know, let me give a little bit of background to my thoughts on character designs for this game, just to kind of set the groundwork for what my mentality is and what my thought process is moving on. I've always been of the opinion that other characters should be able to benefit from them, if not use them with diminishing returns. So to give a couple examples on what I mean, a couple hypotheticals, I've been of the opinion that characters should be able to use Warley's crockpots, since a character got put into DST. The caveat that I think should be proposed is that Worley is the only one who has access to his unique recipes, so those should be tied into his character specifically, and not just his crockpots, which is currently how they're implemented. You could also add other restrictions, such as Worley being the only one to spice his food, or crockpots when used by other characters take longer to cook the food, but fundamentally, I think that his crockpots are Worley's biggest boon, and I think that he should be able to share that with other characters. You know, concessions when they present themselves, however, Worley being the only one to use and apply spices, as well as being the only one to make his own unique recipes, and maybe throw in some boosted buffs for the Worley players, because I know, you know, Worley kind of got the short end of the stick in the transition from Shipwreck to DST, but, you know, ultimately I do think that this would be an interesting way to implement his tools for other characters, and giving him his own personal buffs when eating his own recipes, whether that be through spices or whether that be his own unique recipes. Just having an additional return on investment in that regard would go a long way on making Worley less perceived as a swap character, because now he has his own set of perks that would benefit him. Following that kind of thought process, when Wanda got released, this one might be a little bit more controversial in regards to whether or not people agree with me, but I've always been of the opinion that Wanda should be able to share her clocks with other players, but with worse effects attached to them. So something like the alarming clock, I say should be used by other characters, but in a worse regard. Lock it to something like, I don't know, 27, maybe spear damage, just to make it a little bit more balanced in regards to sharing it with other characters. Because seeing Wanda being the only one who really uses a whip weapon kind of sucks. Having all of her tools just lying on the ground whenever she disconnects also really sucks. And I feel like it's kind of a wasted opportunity to lock everything specifically behind Wanda without giving any other character a means to kind of benefit from that. without Wanda just explicitly being there at all times, basically hovering over your shoulder. So what I think is that if you can implement a character item with a restriction on it that limits its utility, I think that change should be implemented, because it just creates an environment where you look at a character and you think, oh, that character can benefit me in this way. I very much appreciate having this character. It never really feels like a character's, slot in a server is wasted necessarily. But that isn't to say like any character is a waste of a slot or whatever. It just means that a character's utility can be expanded more than it currently is, in my opinion. Though I do understand that some character items are intrinsic to them, so some things should be exempt from this line, such as, Wendy and Abigail, since they're inherently tied to one another. Or, Maxwell's Codex Umbra shouldn't have other characters use Shadow Minions. And, obviously WX should have his own circuits, and, that's something that's specific to him. All of these things work because it's that character using them, and it wouldn't make sense for other characters to have them. Though that isn't to say that other perks they have shouldn't benefit other players. I'd like it if the circuit extractor or something could be used as a generic tool for something like, removing gems for generators, or harvesting, like, electrical doodads from lightning rods, something like that. And Wendy already has her sister, in which is a stationary structure that other players can use to gain sanity, that has benefits to Wendy herself. And Maxwell already has his Magician's Chest, which functions in the same way, and where Maxwell can use it better, since he has access to his Magician's Top Hat, but other characters can still use it to transport items over long distances, which is really cool. It's a really cool implementation, of which I wish that idea was expanded on even more whenever Clay is making a new character's perks, or making just giving characters items or tools. I always cite Bernie as the best example of this, since Bernie never gets big if Willow isn't around, but he always distracts nightmare creatures for others, even when she isn't, making it a pretty versatile tool instead of just Willow's bear. So given this kind of long tangent, this thought process, and this as my opinion on what character design works best for this game, I have mixed feelings about the Winona update, and here's why. Starting off, I really do like the implementation of her emote, since that's basically what sets Winona aside from everybody else to be different, and is what sets her using her catapults apart from other characters using her catapults. I think having that extra bit of functionality is incredibly useful for her, and something that I absolutely love. As a little side note in regards to the Winona remote, I am worried about it just being a dead inventory spot eventually. I'd really love for Clay to allow me to upgrade, like, something that I have at all times, like a lantern or a walking cane, to make Winona's, I don't want to say joystick because that sounds like a euphemism. Shout out to Myther, actually. He said Winona's gear stick. So thanks for that, Myther. Which, functions as a remote / wonky cane combo that you could recharge and wouldn't break at reaching 0. Since, that'd be something that's cool and something that doesn't really feel like a wasted inventory slot whenever you're walking around. But I digress. There are a couple perks that seem to be tied to Winona specifically, which is where I kind of feel iffy about. Starting off with one that I think is fine for the most part for it to be Winona specific, because I don't think it has too big of an impact. And that's the fact that you could pack up and move catapults and generators, which, as an update, it's like, sure, I guess. I'll take it. It's definitely not something that I'm going to say no to. But currently how catapults are being used and how they're being implemented from, all 2 Winona players is that they actually benefit from being stationary, since the places that they're put in are very finicky as far as placement goes, and certain farms set up many catapults, which would make transporting them from one place to another a potential problem in and of itself. And it's for these reasons that I'm kind of whatever about the change. I think I'm fine with it being Winona specific, because usually you're setting up multiple farms throughout the world anyways. So just having a little bit of extra functionality is a good thing. I will say though, the change in how close structures can be placed, which was mentioned earlier in the live stream, does mean that you might have some more wiggle room in regards to planting down catapults as well as generators, which might influence how useful packing up and moving things are. But here's the thing that I've been the most concerned about, and that is the telebrella and the telepad. So, you know, going over what it does in Hamlet, because I know some people might only be from DST. The telebrella is just the telelocator staff, for comparison's sake, and the telepad is the telelocator focus. So it's just long-range teleport. But the telebrella is potentially locked behind specifically being Winona, which, in my opinion, kind of sucks, you know? I don't like the idea of the telebrella, which something that many others could easily make use of, being locked into playing only one character with no upsides to anyone else on the team, especially when it can so easily be transferred to other characters with what I would say is a relatively easy fix. I was discussing this in the Clay Discord, in which you could, instead of making it a simple platform that you teleport onto, you could instead make the platform indicative of a certain range that you could teleport to. You know, I showed this in an image that I'm now going to show on screen, in which the yellow dot is the platform itself, and the outlining circle is where you might be able to teleport to. You know, obviously range would have to vary, range is finicky, you know, all that stuff. The details of which, you know, you'd have to work out. But the fundamental idea is that Winona should be able to use the telebrella to telelocate anywhere within that radius. But the drawback for other characters could be that they could teleport anywhere in that radius. They don't get to choose. This could include the water. So, assuming that you place your telepad basically anywhere, there's a chance that you could just teleport into the water and drown, which I think would be a sufficient enough downside, or to make characters second guess, other than Winona, whether or not using the telepad is the most beneficial thing in that current point in time. Especially because you don't really know what the scenario is in that region either. So you might be teleporting right into the middle of something like a tentacle farm, you might be teleporting into the middle of like hounds, you know, but still being able to teleport nonetheless. So other characters would still be able to make use of it. I do understand though that Clay is very reluctant in regards to introducing a universally applicable character perk, especially when it comes to approaching Winona, which is often regarded as the swap character. But I don't think that just strictly locking it behind characters is the best way to go about it. I firmly believe that there are ways to balance a character out to make them feel like less of a swap character and more like they've got their own set of perks and skills that benefit them in their own gameplay while still impacting the team. But, you know, we'll see what Clay decides to do since this update is on the horizon. And, you know, we still got time before they decide one thing or the other. But, you know, nevertheless, it's something that I'm very much looking forward to. I don't really expect Clay to, like, you know, be watching this video and watching my insight on Winona or whatever. Flattered if they are. But, you know, nevertheless, I think that setting up character perks in a way to where they benefit the character themselves the most, while still having some effects and some influences on other characters, is the best way to go about balancing certain character-specific items, and it's something that I would absolutely love to see implemented more into Winona. But that's all I really got to say for now. I got to get back to, like, you know, taking care of stuff in the background. Let me know what you guys think, whether or not you agree, whether or not you disagree, things like that. Character discussions in this game have always been one of my favorite things, just because of how in-depth and well-designed these characters and the game is. So, you know, let me know what you guys think. That's all I gotta say, so until next time, bye-bye.